أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير آمين يا رب العالمين.
Let us recap the status of ism or i'rab of ism. I'rab or the status of ism represent changes that occur at the end of the ism. When we think of the four characteristics of ism, for gender, we should think masculine or feminine. For number, we should think singular, dual, or plural. For capacity, we should think definite or indefinite. And for status, we should think about the three forms of ism that are rafa, nasab, and jar. An ism in the first form is called marfu, ism in the second form is called mansoob, and ism in the third form is called majroor. The status of a singular ism, whether that's masculine or feminine, is identified by the presence of double pesh or double dhamma, double zabar or double fatha, or double zair or double kasra on the last alphabet of that ism. Double pesh on the last alphabet of a singular ism indicates the rafa status. Double zabar on the last alphabet of a singular ism indicates nasab status, and double zair on the last alphabet of a singular ism indicates jar status. A specific note for nasab that after double zabar, we need to write an alif at the end of the ism. The exception is if the ism ends with a gol ta, or if the ism ends with alif and hamza together, then we don't need to add an alif at the end of an ism after double zabar. Please note that when identifying the status of any ism, we should not only be thinking of harakat at the end of the ism. Relying on this method can be misleading. There are other ways for us to identify the status of the ism, and inshallah, we will be studying them in this lecture. We can do some practice of the status of singular asma. The first example is that of the ism jaza. Jaza means reward or compensation. Ism jaza will have four characteristics. From the standpoint of gender, jaza is masculine. It is masculine because it does not meet criteria for it to be feminine. Ism jaza is singular in number. Ism jaza is indefinite or nakra because it does not meet criteria for the different types of definite asma that we studied. And from the standpoint of status, ism jaza, because it is singular and masculine, it will be on the pattern of jaza'un, jaza'an, and jaza'in. Please note that in the nasab status, we do not need to add an alif at the end of jaza'an because alif and hamza are together at the end of jaza. So in the ism jaza, alif and hamza come together at the end. Therefore, in jaza'an, we do not need to add an alif after the word. The next example is of ism juz. Juz means part. Ism juz is singular and masculine. And because it is singular and masculine, the status of ism juz will be on the pattern of juz'un, juz'an, and juz'in. Here, in the nasab status, we will have to add an alif at the end of juz'an because hamza is there but there is no alif. So alif and hamza are not together at the end of juz. So for juz'an, we need to write an alif at the end. The next example is Muslim. Muslim ism is also singular and masculine. So the status of Muslim will be on the pattern of Muslimun, Musliman, and Muslimin. The next example is dua. Dua ism is also singular and masculine, so the status of ism dua will be on the pattern of dua'un, dua'an, and dua'in. For dua'an, in the nasab status, we do not need to add an alif at the end because alif and hamza are coming together at the end of dua. The next example is su, which means evil or bad. Ism su is also singular and masculine, so the status of su will be on the pattern of su'un, su'an, and su'in. In su'an, we need to add an alif, as alif and hamza are not together at the end of su. Finally, we have the ism muslima, which is singular and feminine, and because muslima is a singular and feminine ism, the pattern of muslima will be on the pattern of muslimatun, muslimatan, and muslimatin. So overall, for all these singular asma, whether they are masculine or feminine, they will end on the same pattern in their three forms of status. We will use this table to summarize the status of different asma that we learn about. For a singular ism or wahid ism that is masculine or feminine, the status of that ism will be on the pattern of double pesh at the end of the ism for rafa, double zabar at the end of the ism for nasab, and double zair at the end of the ism for jar. For example, for a singular masculine ism like Muslim, the status will be Muslimun, Musliman, or Muslimin. And for a singular feminine ism such as Muslima, the three forms of its status will be Muslimatun, Muslimatan, and Muslimatin. Now that we have studied the status of singular asma, in the current lecture, we will focus on studying the status of dual ism. We will study the status of non-broken plural ism and the status of broken plural ism. To summarize dual ism is also called musanna ism. Dual asma will end in the ani and aini sounds. The ending sound applies to both masculine and feminine asma. Let us look at the example of the singular masculine ism Saleh. Saleh means one pious boy or one pious man. And the dual form of Saleh will be either Salehani or Salehaini. Salehani means two pious boys or two pious men. Salehaini means two pious boys or two pious men. Salehani ends in the ani sound. Salehaini ends in the aini sound. For the feminine example, we have Saleha, which means one pious girl or woman. And the dual form of Saleha will be Salehatani or Salehataini. Salehatani means two pious girls or two pious women. Salehataini means two pious girls or two pious women. Salehatani and Salehataini also have the ending sounds ani and aini. Both Salehani and Salehaini and Salehatani and Salehataini have the same meaning. There is a reason why the different forms of the dual ism have the same meaning. Salehani and Salehaini represent the dual form of ism Saleh. Salehani means two pious boys or two pious men. Salehaini means two pious boys or two pious men. So what is the difference between Salehani and Salehaini if they both mean the same? Salehani, which ends in the ani sound, represents the rafa status of ism, or ism in its first form. Salihani is marfu. Salihaini, which ends in the aini sound, represents the nasab status of ism or ism in its second form. Salihaini is mansoob. Salihaini can also represent the jar status of ism or ism in its third form. Salihaini can be majroor. So the difference between Salihani and Salihaini is that Salihani represents the rafa status of ism and Salihaini can represent the nasab or the jar status of ism. Moving to the feminine example, we have Salihatani and Salihataini. Salihatani and Salihataini are dual versions of ism Saliha. Salihatani means two pious girls or two pious women. Salihataini means two pious girls or two pious women. The difference between Salihatani and Salihataini is that Salihatani, which ends in the ani sound, represents the rafa status of ism or ism in its first form. Therefore, Salihatani is marfu. Salihataini, which ends in the aini sound, can represent the nasab status of ism or ism in its second form, in which case Salihataini will be mansoob, or Salihataini can also represent the jar status of ism or ism in its third form, where Salihataini will be majroor. So the difference between Salihatani and Salihataini is that Salihatani represents the rafa status of ism and Salihataini represents the nasab or the jar status of ism. We should note that in all of these examples, the ism has its finishing touch at the end. For example, in Salihani, towards the end, the finishing has already been done. We do not need to add anything else. Similarly, for Salihaini, the finishing touch has been added to the end and we don't need to add anything else. Same goes for Salihatani and for Salihataini. Here we are using ending sounds to identify the status of an ism. Previously, we used the presence of double pesh, double zabar, double zair at the end of an ism to identify the status of that ism. But that is not the case here because we are using ending sounds such as ani and aini. Therefore, we do not have to always rely on harakat at the end of an ism to identify the status of an ism. We will do practice of the status of dual asma. The first word that we have is kitab. Kitab is singular and the status of the dual version of kitab will be kitabani, kitabaini, kitabaini. Kitabani represents the rafa status, kitabaini represents the nasab status, and kitabaini also represents the jar status. Please note that both kitabani and kitabaini have the same meaning, that is, two books, but kitabani and kitabaini differ in terms of the status. Next, Muslim. And for Muslim, the dual versions will be Muslimani, Muslimaini, Muslimaini. Mu'min, Mu'minani, Mu'minaini, Mu'minaini. Munafiq, Munafiqani, Munafiqaini, Munafiqaini. Mushrik, Mushrikani, Mushrikaini, Mushrikaini. Jannah, Jannatani, Jannataini, Jannataini. Muslima, Muslimatani, Muslimataini, Muslimataini. Kafira, Kafiratani, Kafirataini, Kafirataini. Dar, Darani, Daraini, Daraini. We will return to our table for the status of ism. For a singular ism, both masculine and feminine, the three forms of the ism will be identified by the presence of double pesh, double zabar, or double zair at the end of the ism. For example, for the singular masculine ism Muslim, the three forms will be Muslimun, Musliman, and Muslimin. Muslimun represents the Rafa status, Musliman represents the Nasab status, and Muslimin represents Jar status. For a singular feminine ism like Muslima, the three forms of its status will be Muslimatun, Muslimatan, and Muslimatin. We next studied dual asma or musanna asma. We studied that dual or musanna asma will be identified by the presence of the ani or aini ending sounds. And the ani or aini ending sounds will also be used to identify the status of dual or musanna asma. For the masculine ism Muslim, the three forms of its dual version will be Muslimani, Muslimaini, Muslimaini. Muslimani represents Rafa status, Muslimaini represents Nasab status, Muslimaini represents Jar status. For the feminine ism Muslima, the three forms of its dual version will be Muslimatani, Muslimataini, Muslimataini. Muslimatani represents Rafa status, Muslimataini represents Nasab status, and Muslimataini represents Jar status. Next, we will study the status of plural asma. We will study the status of non-broken plural, and we will study the status of broken plural. First, we will study the status of non-broken plural asma. Non-broken plural asma are also called Jama Salim asma. We studied that a different formula will be used to make masculine non-broken plural and feminine non-broken plural. Non-broken plural are identified based on their ending sound. For example, for masculine non-broken plural, they will end in the una or ina sounds. We will look at the example of ism Muslim. Muslim is a singular ism which is masculine, and the non-broken plural version of Muslim will be Muslimuna or Muslimina. From the standpoint of status, it is important to note that una ending sound represents Rafa status for masculine non-broken plural, and ina ending sound represents Nasab or Jar status for masculine non-broken plural. So for the ism Muslim, the non-broken plural versions will be Muslimuna or Muslimina. Muslimuna represents Rafa status, Muslimina represents Nasab or Jar status. For a non-broken plural masculine ism, una represents Rafa status and the ending sound ina represents Nasab or Jar status. Please note that both Muslimuna and Muslimina have their finishing touch at the end of the ism, meaning that both Muslimuna and Muslimina are completed at the end. There is nothing else that we need to add at the end of these two asma. So in the case of masculine non-broken plural, the finishing touch to the ism is based on ending sound, and the ending sound will be una or ina ending sounds. In this table, we will do practice of the status of masculine non-broken plural asma. The first example is of the ism Muslim. The three forms of masculine non-broken plural for Muslim will be Muslimuna, Muslimina, and Muslimina. Muslimuna represents the Rafa status, Muslimina represents Nasab status, and Muslimina represents Jar status. Una sound represents Rafa status, ina ending sound represents Nasab status, and ina ending sound represents Jar status. Mu'min, Mu'minuna, Mu'minina,
مؤمنين. منافق منافقون منافقين منافقين. مشرك مشركون مشركين مشركين. In all these examples, una and ina ending sounds, they all have the same meaning, but they differ with regards to their status. Una ending sound will represent rafa status, and ina ending sound will represent nasab or jar status. We will return to our table of the status of ism. For singular asma, both masculine and feminine, the three forms of the ism will be on the pattern of Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin, Muslimatun, Muslimatan, Muslimatin. For dual or musanna asma, for both masculine and feminine, the status will be based on the ending sound. So, we will have the three forms of ism as Muslimani, Muslimaini, Muslimaini.